welcome to Angel's Nook. We're going to be working on a piece today that I did probably 5 years ago. It's been sitting out on my patio. The HTP paint itself has held up beautifully, but the transfers I put on it have not been able to hold up to sunlight. So I want to redo this piece. It's also very gray, which went with the paint that was on our house at the time, which was a pale, almost baby blue that was on there when we bought the house. And then it does not go at all with the new colors that we have on the outside of the house. So this both needs to be redone because the transfers have bleached out, and it needs to look more like it belongs on the patio again. It holds outdoor throws, it holds tools for the barbecue. It's just a nice size to grab the different things that we have. It's an odd shape, which made it a little bit unique, which is also why I did some playful things with it when I first did it. It's going to look much more traditional when I get done with it this time. I am going to be using the liquid deglosser and a green Scotch-Brite scrubby pad without a sponge. That's going to be the best to get everything off of this because this has pollen on it. It has dirt from being outside. Where we live, every year we literally get a black dirt from the Saharan desert in Africa blows through our area and deposits on things, and it's got a stickiness to it that doesn't like to come off. The first thing I'm going to do, because nothing has been done to this, we just brought it from the back patio when they were painting to get it out of the way and brought it in here. The first thing I'm going to do is just give it a wipe down with Windex. That's going to get a lot of the heavier duty stuff off of it. You can see that black dust. This is primarily MDF, so even though it wasn't a cheap piece when it was bought originally by the people that I got it from, it's not really a high quality piece, but man, a lot of dirt coming off of it. I save an empty can from Deglosser that I can pour Deglosser into this, small amounts, and I don't get all of a can of Deglosser contaminated with dirt and sludge. So these, a green scrubby will go for a really long time on these. And I'm really scrubbing on this. This is not a wipe. And when you use the HTP wipes, don't just wipe it off. Really scrub with it. The texture of the wipes are made to help you clean and get everything off of it. I'm going to put a transfer back on the top of this when I redo it, but I'm going to seal it this time. Instead of with just clear coat, I'm going to clean it with, I'm sorry, not clean it. That's what happens when you're doing two things at once. I'm going to make sure that the sealant that I use has extra UV protectant on it, which should help keep it holding longer. That still had a lot coming off of it. which is why I'm doing a second deglossing. I can feel it's clear. I can't get the squeaky sound for you. Still got some dampness. There you go. It's got to be dry, but when you pull your fingers, and you can hear that in the different parts of it, you know you've got it clear, because sometimes finish will start to come off and it's not really that there's dirt still there, it's just degraded finish coming off. So this is going to be done to all of this. I'm going to take the drawers out, I'm going to take the hardware off and completely degloss the whole thing. There's some repair that has to be done on the bottom left side over here where that some of the wood has cracked between sun and moisture getting on it with rain blowing in on it. So those things will be done and it will be ready to start painting the first coat of paint on it. When I put this transfer on originally and I top coated it with 3 coats of just clear coat to keep it from tearing off, because transfers are really fragile if you just put them on top of a surface and you don't seal them with multiple coats. Anything running across it can scrape that off. So after I deglossed this and I was going back feeling the areas, I had taped this off to seal the transfer itself. So along that edge there's a slight raised area there. I don't want that on my new coat of paint. So I'm taking a block of wood that's been wrapped with sandpaper 220 grit, and it was put on with carpet tape that's double-sided, really thin carpet tape underneath to keep it stuck on there. But the wood keeps it flat, it keeps you from making divots as you press differently as you're rubbing, and it gives you a smooth edge between 2 areas like this that are meeting that have a slightly different raised texture to them. And I've already done this side. I'm going to do the front edge here off camera, and then it will be ready after I've done that to any of the other edges where there are transfers on the side. It will be ready for the first coat of paint. I'm going to be using Putty by Heirloom Traditions on this particular piece. It's a very, very pale taupe that sometimes can almost read white in a setting, but it's a greige. It's got, depending on what colors are with it, it's going to pull more toward the cools and the grays, or if it's in a warm palette setting, it's going to pull toward the warmth of the true taupe. It makes it a really nice neutral, and I think it's going to be really pretty with the new paint color that we have on our house. I'm only going to be doing the top of this for you because that seems to be one of the areas that people have the most trouble with, is figuring out how to paint a full surface. And one of the things that you need to think about, I'm just going to get this thing out of the way and just go back and forth with it, is when you are creating, if you're going this way across it, you're going to create a wet lap line. This is too large to put paint on the whole thing and then start rolling. You're going to have a difficult time rolling out the brush marks. You're going to press too hard on your roller and you're going to create roller marks, and you don't want that. So when you're going through, like on the whole strip, you barely overlap into where you've already rolled, and you repeat doing the strips, or if you do a third of it, and a third of it, and a third of it, you never want to lap your paint at exactly the same spot, because where you lap with one coat of paint, you've actually got 2 coats of paint. So at the point at which you do your second coat, if you lap at exactly the same point, you now have 4 coats of paints there, and it starts to create a ridge that shows, and you don't want to do that. I wish I wasn't dealing with a gallon, because a quart would be very easy to have over here. But I also don't know how much this is going to take, so I'm not going to pour it out into containers. I'm rolling enough to see that my brush marks are going away. But I am not rolling hard like you would on a wall. There are no large bubbles that need popped. And I've got really good light for me. It's letting me see this. You should be able to notice how often I am dipping back into the paint, and that I'm only dipping the ends of my brush. I'm not going way up on that brush. If I get paint all the way up into the hilt, I'm going to have a very stiff brush really rapidly. And I'm being careful not to roll way back into. I'm just meeting that roller line, that brush line. I'm just letting the the roller roll itself along this. I'm guiding it. I am not putting any pressure at all. I'm double checking while it's still really wet for any spots where there might be large bubbles. There aren't any. And again, I'm just meeting that edge. I also purposely did not add a layer of primer on this. I don't need it. It's in the paint, and you can see how well just this first coat is going on, and this is a very light color. This should only take 2 coats to have this fully covered, and no one had any idea that there was ever a transfer under here. I'm going across the brush strokes. That is the most efficient way to get brush strokes blended, and then all you have to do is come back across it, barely touching it. Sometimes edges like this are a little crankier to get all your bubbles off of. You just kind of have to experiment for which way is popping them all and which way might be leaving some. So, first coat is going on the rest of this. This is a beautiful coverage for the first coat. You should see that this is a beautiful first coat with all that blue and white contrast under here. It's not showing at all. And on the sides, the same thing, where there were two large lighthouse transfers. They are covered just as well as this. I'm going to do the top again for you. And also, I will show you how well the front covered too, over that super dark blue, which was actually polo with some antiquing gels done over it. So 2 coats is definitely going to cover this beautifully. The first time when I did this, I went to about right here on my first row of going across. So this time I'm coming to here, which will be in between. Here close I can see where I lapped, so I'm going to hit in the middle of that so that I'm not building up the layers that I talked to you about earlier. And I have washed my brush and my roller between these coats. You're not going to get little flecks of paint, dry paint coming off in your surface. And you're not going to have, pardon me, pieces of the foam roller coming off because it dried and stuck, or just makes a very unattractive texture because of dry paint in it, and especially on the edges of the roller. And if you're only dipping your brush the way I am, you're going to have very little paint come out of your brush in washing it, which you can see in the library of my videos for how to clean the brushes. Going across the brush strokes, and then just lightly letting it just roll itself. And because I've got good light, I can look across the surface and see if there are any areas where there are bubbles that haven't popped. And I should not have sat that gallon jug on here. Because the paint is not cured. Definitely 2 coats is going to cover this, and I'm going to continue with the drawers and the sides off camera. I want to put some contrasting stripes on this. I don't want a huge contrast, but I want to do a little something different with this particular dresser. And lo and behold, normally you should be able to do like the center of the drawers, measure out equally, and your stripes all line up. But every one of these drawers is a completely different size. Thankfully, the holes for the hardware are drilled perfectly, but it doesn't lend itself, because of the curve and everything, to get everything lined up straight. So I've used yellow frog tape on the front of this. This has been drying for 3 days. I tried putting tape on earlier in an unobtrusive place, and it was not ready to have tape on it. Wait at least 3 days. Don't rush taping something and then have the paint lift off because it's not cured. It's not going to do that when it's cured, but when it's only a few days painted, it's going to possibly lift on you and tear, and then you've got a mess that you've got to fix. Because that tear, if you don't get it sanded properly, is not going to leave a smooth finish when you repaint over it. So I've used yellow frog tape here, and the only area that I had a completely straight edge, because the sides here bow in, it's serpentine all over the place, was the very back here. And you can see that I have green frog tape back here. I have not pressed it down hard, but yellow frog tape can like to wiggle and move and lift off if you don't have it completely pressed down. So what I'm going to do, what I did back here, is I found my center point, and then I started measuring and marking based on the width of the yellow frog tape. It's a lot easier sometimes, depending on how many stripes you want, just to use the width of the tape to help you get through it. Because this is all curved on the front, I couldn't just measure across here, and I don't trust that these two curves here are in the same place on this, and I don't want these wonky. So what we did was we completely taped with green frog tape the back of a T-square, and then both of us working on it, we lined up on my marks back here, and then I made marks on the front. And it will look off to you because of the curve on this. It'll look like some of them are wider, some of them are narrower, which is another reason why you can't just measure across the front like you did across the flat edge back here. So now those are all lined up. And that's going to allow me, with the help of the laser, because the yellow frog tape doesn't have the stiffness to it. If I was just using green frog tape, I could match up these marks with the tape and lay it down, and they'd be in place. But yellow frog tape, which is what I need to not lift the paint, is more wiggly. So we're going to use the laser, but we're going to line them up with the marks that I have made to tape on here. And when I marked the measurements on here, another thing that I did is I want a stripe straight down the middle of the top here and straight down the drawers. You have to think about where you want the stripes to show. So I marked back here the center, and I've also put an X on it that I don't want to tape between those two marks. I want to tape on each side, because then that leaves that center panel untaped for me to paint. So it's going to be awkward with this to show you actually the process of putting the tape on here, but I'll show you what it looks like after we've taped it and we've got it ready to go for the next step. I was surprised that I have been able to do this freehand by using the marks, but you have to hold the tape very taut, very firmly, and line up the lines visually. And then work from one side to the other. And I'm not putting it all the way to the back here yet, because I have to remove the green tape so that I can actually paint that whole area. And it's much handier with the yellow if you have a second pair of hands. I won't be putting a piece down to hold it like this. Well, That one just went. That's why you don't want to do it by yourself. Yellow, and once it's got a crease in it, and also once it's stuck to something, it won't stick properly again. I can't win for losing right now with this. I'm gonna try one more time. Hang it this way. Alright, let's try it this way and see if I can do it. Once this, especially the yellow, sticks to something, it doesn't act as a seal anymore. If you lift it off to try again. This one's longer than I want, but I can get it to line up. We're going to do the rest of these off camera so I can have some help with another pair of hands. Sometimes, when you question your thoughts on whether or not you really want to put stripes on something, it's very evident with the laser that none of these drawers are actually lined up. The holes are in all different places, so wherever this was made, probably somewhere in Asia, it was hand drilled and put together, because this is the only way that these drawers will go back into this chest. This is the only order. So I'm going to go ahead and line up the stripes, and then we're going to look at which set of holes we're going to maintain as the ones that we're going to use, and then we'll fill the rest of them and seal them and paint them, because this will really make the stripes look like the stripes are completely out of kilter if all the hardware is not here together. We used whiter green frog tape, taped way back under the drawers to use as pulls, because I knew I needed to line up tape here. So often you can put like a screw or something in here to pull these out when you're painting, but putting stripes on here does not lend itself to that. So I'm going to go ahead and put the tape on for the stripes. I only use frog tape. I will not use any other brand. The blue stuff consistently bleeds, and I have had it pull up paint more times than I can count. This finish after 3 days is not ready to have green frog tape put onto it, and definitely not the blue stuff, because I lifted paint on the back, pulling it off to smooth down the rest of the yellow tape to be able to paint the stripes. Thankfully, the area that it lifted is area that I'm putting the stripes on, so that's a good thing. And yellow frog tape is made for delicate surfaces, like if you have to tape off, say, wallpaper, or something else that's very fragile, or it's newer paint. Because like right now, I've not pressed this down hard everywhere. I've just gently pressed it on there so I had marking points. I will go over the edges of this when I get ready to paint with a damp paper towel, because that will activate the edge of the frog tape. Frog tape only has sealing glue 1/4 inch in on each side. The middle is just regular adhesive, but if you put a damp paper towel on that, it gives you a tight seal, and then when you paint and you lift it off, you have perfectly straight lines. And the blue stuff just does not give you that. It wobbles the edge, it bleeds underneath. Occasionally I will have frog tape bleed, but I always look at it as probably being user error, that I didn't get everything done the way I needed. So I'm using the laser to guide where I'm putting the tape. The center going down this with it bowed in and bowed, it's both concave going this way and it's convex going this way. Without the laser, it would be next to impossible for me to see where I actually need to have this tape running. And the X's that I put up at the top up here are reminding me where that I want to have the stripes and where I want to have spaces. So I'm going to continue taping, but that gives you some reasoning behind what and how I'm doing here and what we're going to have to figure out in a little bit. It's got to come down a lot smaller. So right now, this is feeling like these rough boundaries are a good start. And I can cut it and then see what it looks like on top of here. I can't imagine using all this extra. Now I'm going to save this in case I need to overlay a spot that I don't like the color. Okay, so my next step is I'm going to cut this and see what it looks like. This isn't an exact match over, but I can deal with that after it's cut down to size. And this white line has no transfer, so there won't be a white line on that. I'm looking for, because I definitely do not want on the top of this a square frame of this at all. Let's see. This is less. But it's not landing right on these. So I went narrower over here. So I have to rethink this in relationship to the stripes. Problem is, if this bleeds through, it's not bleeding through right now, which is telling me this is pretty. Oh, that's because that's under the white's under there. So the color stripes would bleed through this. So it's at this point I have to decide whether or not I'm using this, because I can't put the stripes under it. It will totally distort the picture if I want this transfer, because I'd have to sand the top and remove any of it. So if I'm going to do this with this, which I think is kind of cool for where we're putting it, because this all needs to be the putty underneath this. It all needs to stay putty. So I have to mark around this and then avoid it when I paint. But I have to get that a very light line, because pencil is really bad at bleeding through. No, tape, it doesn't matter on the tape, it'll just help me line things up. And I will go a little bit inside the lines with the white, because the transfer is going to move some putting it on, because this isn't completely flat. Those are the shipping bins. Projects always can come up with different things that interfere with your original plans, and that happened with these drawers. You can see that some of the tape is off right now because I filled all of the holes where the hardware originally was with the drawers in place, because taking them out was going to disturb all the taping, and I really didn't want to redo all the taping. So now that area where that I filled and repainted has got to dry for 48 hours before I can put yellow tape back on it to start painting the stripes on the front of this. But I also have the issue that I have decided, you saw me working on and cutting and shaping a transfer for the top of this. I still want that with where this piece is going outside, and it would still work indoors as a coastal piece. The colors in the background of the transfer are a perfect blend with putty, so that's what's going in this area here. And the reason that I have all of that, had all of that on there cut out and then went around it very lightly with pencil, because pencil will bleed through paint, and especially white paint, really easily. I can't erase this off right now, and I won't be able to when I put the transfer on there. But what I want to do is this whole interior section here where the transfer will be can't have stripes under it. Transfers are so thin that the stripes would bleed through it. If I wanted a striped effect with really tiny stripes, that would be a different story, because that can be a really cool effect. And I've done that on other pieces, but I don't want that on this, because I want these stripes to be their own entity. And I'm going to have to wait, once this has the white stripes finished on it, I'm going to have to wait for 48 hours before I can put the transfer on. The transfer tends to stick too quickly if the paint's not got a cured skin on it. And the worst part of it is, though, as you are rubbing it, which you'll see later with the wood stick to smooth it down and adhere it, you can very easily pull up fresh paint. You can scrape it up, and you don't want to do that with this. So now that I have this outline on here, I know exactly where I can paint white paint and where I can't, because I want everything inside my outline to ultimately be putty to put this transfer on. So the next thing I'm going to be doing here is starting my first coat of Cashmere. With what I want to do with this, I think 2 coats are all I'm going to need to get where I want to be with this. So that's what's going to happen now, and I'm going to be working a lot with a smaller art brush to get into and around the designs of this to keep this edge where I need it to be coming under the transfer. So that's the next step with this. For the contrasting stripes, I'm going to be using Cashmere as the base coat of this, and then I'm going to be adding another layer over it once I get a good coverage of Cashmere on here. I have gone ahead and taped these edges because I only want the paint to be on the very top edge of this. I don't want it going down onto the sides of this. So I have 2 brushes here. One is a 1 1/4 inch flat art brush that's seen a lot of hard work, but it's going to be used in the big areas. And then I have that 1/2 inch half brush that I use an awful lot. These are in packs at Home Depot of different sizes, but they last for a very long time. And I really like them and their ability to move along some of these really more intricate curves that I have created on this so that I get a really smooth edge. I am going to be rolling, but I'm also going to be careful that I am not rolling way into the center area that I can see on this. This was stirred extremely well off camera, and that's needed for any of the HTP paints. And since this is where I'm starting here, which is narrow, I'm going to be using the 1/2 inch brush to do that. It's a little bit harder to get the amount of paint that you need on, but you have control, which is vital in things. And this tiny spots, the round Syntec brush is just too large. And I'm being careful, or trying to be, and the reason you see me rotating the brush is so that I'm not going to be dripping across this surface and creating paint where I don't want it. I have paper towels handy to pull off if that happens. And for this wider strip, I'm going to be using the wider art brush. These last rolls are just letting the roller, I have absolutely no pressure. It's just guiding the roller to let it pop all of the bubbles on there. I'm going a little bit inside the outline, but I still want to stay pretty close to it. The very light amounts getting inside won't matter, and in fact it will help me when I start to do an edge to soften the edge of the transfer once it's put on. This is still giving me control of how far I get inside that outline. A little bit bigger brush makes it easier to get a good coat of paint on here. You have the idea of how I'm going to be working with the two smaller brushes to go around this. I know it's going to need a second coat, so that will probably be done off camera, so that then we can see the next steps with what's going to be done with this. Unfortunately, with the camera glitch, some of our video got destroyed. So at this point, all the stripes have had, all the white stripes have had 2 coats of cashmere on it, and it's plenty for what I want to do. It's got good coverage on it. It looks good. The next thing I want to do, you can see here how much contrast there is between putty and cashmere, even though on earlier parts of this video, putty looked like it was almost pure white. But now you can see more of what color tone it really is. And I don't want, because these stripes are wide, I don't want this sharp a contrast between the 2 colors on this piece. So I experimented off camera, and I'm going to be using what's called a plastic bag technique. I've got half of a plastic grocery bag here, and I really want to get a wad of it so that I've got, and you have to play with it for a little while to get it so that there's truly, I don't want the end pieces out because they'll drag. See how this does, and I may have to move it in a different way. But you want it really tight because I don't want big blotches with this. What I'm going to be doing is putting, I have thinned some putty. I had a little bit left in a jar. And so I would estimate, because I kept thinning and stamping to see where it got to the color, the weight that I wanted, that it was going to give me the stamp that I wanted. It's probably 1 part paint to a half to 3/4 part water It's not as thin as a wash, but it's significantly thinner than the paint normally is. And in order to do this so that I don't have a lot on the bag, I paint a thin coat on here. And then you should be able to see how little is actually on here. It's not totally coating this. And so then I'm just going to do some light taps on this. It'll have a little bit of a leather look to it, and I'm barely tapping into this, and then just barely touching on here. It's a slower process because I can't put a lot of paint on here, and I'm having to do it left-handed. I'll still have distinct stripes, but they'll be more muted and they'll have some texture, which will give some more interest to the piece. It's almost a leather effect, and if you were using browns, it would definitely give you a leather look. Straight paint was too much. And as thin as a wash did not give a distinct enough design. And that's what's going to happen to the rest of these stripes. The tape is off of everywhere except right here, and I've already got my transfer laid on here and taped down with yellow tape because I needed the line that's on this piece of tape to help me line up this very first piece of the transfer. But now that I have it taped, I can go ahead and lift this off. But one of the things I wanted to show you with the tape, when you're taking tape off that you have painted over, don't just rip it off, and especially when it's recently painted. You want to take it off in a slow, steady pull. And if you see it starts to lift paint, go to the other end and start pulling the other direction so that you don't pull a whole strip of paint off with you. These are pulled up a little bit here because I went ahead because I knew I talked to you earlier that I had lifted paint with the green frog tape. So I had lifted tape out of the way so that I could touch that up. And the unevenness on here is because the transfer will be on here. And I have a tool out with me. And I crease a transfer, the backing on it, so that I can get it completely flat and get a section attached. And since I have that attached, it's fine now for me to pull the backing off, but you want to take your hand all along it, because once it sticks down, it's not coming back off. The center portion has been drying for 3 days, so it should be fine to handle the pressure of the wood tool. And I just went off the edge and did lift paint there. So it would have been really even better if I had waited closer to a week to try to work on this. But as long as you stay on the plastic topping and you don't use a corner, you stay flat, 72 hours is enough. To let you apply a transfer. And then checking that it's actually adhering, which this has. And again, don't yank these transfer pieces off in a hurry, because you can tear it where it has not yet adhered to the surface. This one doesn't have a lot of tiny little pieces, so it should come off a lot easier. When you have little pieces and little stems and leaves and different things, it's a much slower process, because these things never seem to come off fast like you see in some of the videos. And I'm using very firm pressure, pressing down on this. Don't tape down on the transfer. Because it will just lift it off and tear it. A straight edge would be a better plan on this for me to cut it with an X-Acto knife. But this point that I'm cutting off is not the transfer at all. If you're not good cutting pure straight edges with a pair of scissors without getting jaggedy pieces, definitely use a yardstick and an X-Acto knife. Because these are made to butt up exactly against each other. And if you try just lining it up on one side and you think, oh, I've got it, it looks good, you'll find that you have a gap either this way or you've done it so that it's going to come up onto the other portion of the transfer, and you do not want that. And even right here, even though the mast of the ship looked like it was right, it was going to leave a gap between there. I'm going to do exactly what I did on the first one. Fold back a piece, keep this held up. I'm going to work on this piece and the last piece exactly the same way. And we'll come back and do the next steps. By trimming this before you start to apply it, because you cannot see for sure that 1/4 inch boundary that they have on there. It's very difficult to see where that actually goes, so you have to cut it off to make this line up exactly right. And right now, this is all one smooth finished picture. And to help prevent it from from the sunlight bleaching out the color on this transfer. It won't do anything to the paint, but the transfer sunlight will fade these out in a hurry. I don't want it to look faded like it did before. It's going to be in a little bit more protected area, but the reflected sunlight that comes from the water up into the ceiling and then bounces back down has the same effect as if it was sitting in direct sunlight for this. So I'm going to mask off these outer areas and give this 3 coats of a UV protectant. Krylon makes it, it's a triple coat. But I'm going to put 3 coats on there to help keep the UV light from taking the color out of this. And then there's a couple of more steps that I want to do to soften the edge of this that I'm going to be sharing with you. I'm going to add what I was talking about before, the Krylon UV resistant clear coat. Sometimes it's in a triple coat form, and sometimes it's like this, but it is an art topping. It is not a, it's not your regular clear coat. This is designed to seal paintings, to seal artwork, and it works really well over transfers that you don't want, or anything else. Anytime I use art paints beyond, when I'm not using just HTP on something that's going to be outside, if I'm using my regular art paints, I always seal it with this. It also works just as a good sealant for being able to power wash things without damaging any of the paint on more fragile surfaces. So this is going to get 3 coats on here. When you're spraying it on, you want to make sure that you are not creating puddles. It's better to do multiple extra coats than to get puddles on this, because you won't be able to get them off, and if you try to wipe them off, you'll damage the transfer. And the pieces that I saved from the transfer are working for me as a shield, because I don't want the spray of this on anything else. And this can just does not want to open. I don't want to be down close on this, I want to be up from it. And I'm going to do a spray in the air just to see how it's coming out and how far it's going. I'm going to let this dry, and when it's dry to the touch, I'll add another coat, and I'll repeat that for 3 full coats on this. What I want to do to this next, because this is thoroughly dry now, is I want to soften all of these sharp edges. I want it to just blend into this. So I'm going to be using the thinned putty that I created, and I'm going to be using some of the HTP whitewash antiquing gel. So I'm going to be working on it the same way that I did with the white stripes, but I'm going to put it on a little heavier, at least for the base coat of this. And again, I'm creating a stamping pad for myself. And I'm not going way out into the white stripes, but I am wanting to get the edge off of the transfer. I did not need to do the spray over the transfer to seal it. I could have used one of the antiquing gels. A lot of people like to age it down with the whitewash. Or you can also just put one coat of, if you have it, the HTP water resistant sealer, or one coat of a clear top coat, but not a spray top coat. The transfers need more protection than that. Because as you set things on a transfer, if it's not got several coats of protectant on it, it will start to scratch off. And that's frustrating if you've made a really nice piece and suddenly your transfer is damaged. Not having to put paint on the plate as often as I did when I was doing the white stripes, because I'm able to dip more often into it because I wanted a heavier coat on this. I'm being very careful not to scoot a can across this, because that could easily scrape paint that has not yet cured. And I'm not necessarily wanting pure white with this, so I don't care to change the bag right now, because I like the pattern it's doing. The antiquing gel is thinner and more viscous. This is one of those steps that you just keep working until it's visually the way you want it to be, and that the edge is masked as far as you want it to be. And it takes more pounces and works with the whitewash than it does with the thinned putty. I don't know how well it's showing on camera, but this is not creating solid color at all. I'm going to go back. And add some putty into this. And because the antiquing gel is still going to be very malleable, it's going to allow it to blend together in some of the areas, which will create 3 different tonalities on this edge. The pure putty color, the pure white, and basically when it gets pounced together, a half and half mix of the white and the putty. I'm using a clean piece of the bag. I'm not smearing what I have paint on. I know that can be confusing if you were looking at it. Let me walk around so I can see this from the other side. And I can see a couple of areas that I want it to go farther out, but the edge is still too sharp. This whole side is blended well. And that rolling of the brush back and forth keeps you from having a blob drop off your brush, land where you don't want it to be. Got it again. Now I'm pretty happy with it. It's quieted down. It's not sharp edges. And it kind of pulls back into the swirls of the clouds in the water as well. So we'll let this dry, and while it's drying, we'll mark and drill the holes on the drawers to get the hardware back on. Because this has antiquing gel as well as thinned paint, the antiquing gel takes longer to dry because it has more open work time in it. So this is not going to dry as fast as paint would. So you have to bear that in mind and not set anything on it, or stick your hands on it to see if it's dry, because it's not going to be, and you're going to take away any of the pattern that you've created if you run your fingers into it right now. Proper prep, taking the bits of extra time to let layers dry if you're adding faux finishes to something or you're just adding extra details, is worth the time and effort. If you try to just put something together really fast, if it's something you don't really care about, that's one thing. But if it's a piece you want to enjoy for a long time, take the extra time to do any repairs that need to be done, to do any changes in letting layers dry. If you're going to do something like these stripes, that dry time is just crucial. And you'll also not be in tears if you wait to do the taping that you need to do. In the case of this, I had a couple of places where when I lifted the tape, and I knew I had done it early, it pulled paint up. And I have enough years of experience that I was able to get that painted back down, and other people won't find it. But I also got the quick reminder to myself of, you needed to have waited. But I wanted to get this piece finished and get my patio the rest of the way together. So do what I say and not what I do sometimes, because that will save you heartache and you'll have a much better finished piece. This is ready now to be outside. It doesn't need any further top coat. The HTP paints, stains, antiquing gels, all the components in them are exterior grade. You don't think about putting a top coat on your house, so why would you put a top coat on something you're going to set outside, as long as it's not going to be holding water, have standing water on it. At that point, you would need some water, the water-resistant sealer put on it. But if it's a deep bowl, then that's not even going to hold it, because water just is quite a powerful drilling force over time. I'm very happy with how this came out. It was worth the effort to reline up the pulls so that they are lined up correctly. This was more difficult to think about, and I would not have tried to tape the stripes without having a laser, because I've got the convex of the front, then I've got the concave coming in, concave on the sides. There's 3 different angles of curves coming into that. It would have been impossible to tape it properly to get the stripes where I wanted them. And even now there's a little bit of visual discrepancy with it, but I know by the laser it's straight, it's an optical illusion. And I'm happy with it. I like the look of this, I like the colors. It was fun having the bright colors of the lighthouses on each end and having just a playful look on the front of it. But this is a piece now that can be used outdoors on the patio in a protected area, or it can be used indoors. If I change my mind, I can bring it in, and it's going to be easy to wipe it down, clean it, and keep it in good shape, even with the pollen and everything outside. Thanks for being here. Please give us a like, a comment, and please subscribe. It really helps us and costs you absolutely nothing.